The day my mother-in-law's boyfriend threw a 6-year-old out of her house, I learned family isn't always blood. It's a battlefield. I stood frozen, watching little Sophie's tiny sneakers scuff the porch as she clutched her teddy bear like a lifeline, her sobs slicing through the dusk. It started with a phone call. My husband, David, and I were sprawled on our couch, halfway through a Netflix binge, when his phone buzzed. His mother, Linda, was on the other end, her voice dripping with that syrupy urgency she wielded like a weapon. David, it's an emergency. You need to come over, now. No details. Just that tone like she was auditioning for a soap opera. David, ever the dutiful son, grabbed his keys before I could ask what was wrong. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because Linda's emergencies usually meant trouble for us. We pulled up to her sprawling suburban house where her boyfriend, Carl, was pacing the front lawn like a caged bull. Sophie, Linda's granddaughter from her estranged daughter, stood shivering by the mailbox, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her big brown eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, were red-rimmed and glassy. Carl's voice boomed across the yard. She's not my kid. I'm not running a daycare here. I grabbed David's arm, my nails digging in. What the hell is going on? I whispered. He didn't answer, just stared at Sophie, his jaw tight. Linda emerged from the house, her face a mask of crocodile tears. Oh, David, thank God you're here. Carl's just overwhelmed. Sophie's mom dropped her off last week, and we can't keep her. You know how hard it is for us. Hard Linda lived in a 4-bedroom house with a pool, funded by her late husband's pension and Carl's shady consulting gigs. Meanwhile, David and I were scraping by in a 1-bedroom apartment, still paying off student loans. I shot her a look, but she avoided my eyes, focusing on David like he was her personal savior. Mom, why can't you keep her? David asked, his voice low but shaking. She's family. Family, Carl snorted, stepping closer. He was a big guy, all muscle and ego, with a sneer that made my skin crawl. She's your sister's mess, not ours. I told Linda, either the kid goes, or I do. Sophie whimpered, hugging her teddy tighter. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back. It's okay, sweetie. I lied, because nothing about this was okay. My heart twisted. She was just a kid, caught in the crossfire of adult egos. Linda seized the moment, her voice turning plaintive. David, you and Emma are so good with kids. Sophie adores you. Maybe you could take her in, just for a while. I felt the air leave the room, even though we were outside. David's face crumpled, torn between duty and dread. We talked about kids someday, but not now, not when we were barely keeping our heads above water. I wanted to scream at Linda, to tell her to take responsibility for her own granddaughter, but David's hand squeezed mine, a silent plea to stay calm. Mom, we can't just, he started, but Linda cut him off. You can't let her go to foster care. David, imagine what your sister would say. Imagine what your father would say. She knew exactly where to aim David's guilt over his dad's death, his need to prove he was a good son. Carl crossed his arms, smirking. You got a big heart, kid. Use it. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I pulled Sophie closer, her small body trembling against mine. We'll figure this out, I whispered, though I had no idea how. That night, back at our apartment, Sophie slept on our couch, her teddy tucked under her chin. David and I sat at the kitchen table, whispering so we wouldn't wake her. Emma, what are we supposed to do? He asked, his voice raw. She's my niece. I can't abandon her. I know, I said, but my stomach churned. But we're not ready for this. We can't afford it. And Linda, she's playing you. David, she's got the space, the money, she just doesn't want the responsibility. He rubbed his temples, looking older than his 32 years. She said it's temporary, just until my sister gets clean. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Your sister's been getting clean for years, and Linda knows it. She's dumping this on us because she can. David didn't argue. He just stared at the table, guilt eating him alive. I loved him for his heart, but I hated how it made him vulnerable to Linda's manipulation. The next few weeks were chaos. Sophie was a sweet kid, but she was also a whirlwind spilling juice on our rug, waking up screaming from nightmares, asking when her mom was coming back. I tried to be patient, but I was drowning. My job as a graphic designer was already demanding, and now I was juggling daycare drop-offs and therapy appointments for a kid who wasn't mine. David was no better, working overtime to cover the extra costs, coming home exhausted and distant. Linda, meanwhile, called daily not to check on Sophie, but to remind David how grateful she was. "You're doing the right thing," she'd say, her voice thick with fake tears. Carl would chime in, all fake sincerity. "You're a better man than me." Dave, I wanted to strangle them both. One night, after Sophie had a meltdown over a broken crayon, I snapped, "David, this isn't fair. We didn't sign up for this. Why are we the ones sacrificing everything?" He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "She's got no one else. Emma, if we don't step up, who will?" "Linda," I shouted. "She's got a mansion and a boyfriend who's apparently allergic to kids. Why isn't she stepping up?" David sighed, defeated. "She won't. You know how she is." I did. Linda had always been a master manipulator, using guilt like a scalpel. When David's dad died, she leaned on him to be the man of the house at 16. When his sister spiraled into addiction, Linda blamed everyone but herself. Now, she'd found the perfect way to offload Sophie while keeping her halo intact. I started digging. I called social services, tracked down Sophie's mom, even reached out to distant relatives. Nobody wanted to touch the situation. Sophie's mom was in rehab again with no release date in sight. The relatives claimed they were too busy or not equipped. Social services offered foster care, but the thought of Sophie in a stranger's home broke my heart. One evening, I found David sitting on the floor with Sophie, building a lopsided Lego castle. She giggled, her first real laugh in weeks. He looked up at me, his eyes soft. "She's starting to feel safe," he said. I nodded, but my chest ached. I loved Sophie, but I resented how we'd been cornered into this. I resented Linda's smug certainty that we'd cave. Most of all, I resented how David's loyalty to his family was tearing us apart. The breaking point came at a family dinner at Linda's. She'd invited us over, claiming she wanted to check in on Sophie. Carl was there, cracking beers and acting like nothing had happened. Sophie clung to me, wary of him. Linda, all smiles, served lasagna and said, "You two are doing such a great job. Sophie's lucky to have you." I couldn't take it anymore. "Lucky," I said, my voice shaking. "She's not lucky. She's a kid who got kicked out of her grandmother's house because your boyfriend didn't want her around. And instead of fighting for her, you guilted us into taking her." The room went silent. Carl's face reddened. "Watch your tone." "Emma." "No," I shot back. "You don't get to play victim here. You threw a 6-year-old out like trash. And you," I turned to Linda, "you let him. You could have said no, but you chose him over your own granddaughter." Linda's eyes welled up, but I wasn't buying it. "Emma, that's not fair. We were in a tough spot." "Tough spot," I laughed. "You've got a guest room bigger than our apartment. Don't talk to me about tough spots." David put a hand on my arm. "Emma, stop." "No." "David, I'm done stopping." I looked at Linda, my voice steady. "If you want to be a grandmother, act like one. Take responsibility for Sophie, or at least help us. But don't you dare sit there and act like we're the heroes when you forced us into this." Carl stood, towering over me. "You're out of line, and you're out of excuses," I said, staring him down. Sophie started crying, and David scooped her up, shooting me a look that was half anger, half gratitude. We left without another word. Back home, David and I had the fight we'd been avoiding for weeks. He admitted he felt trapped, torn between his love for Sophie and his resentment toward his mom. I admitted I was scared we'd lose ourselves trying to save her. But we agreed on one thing: Sophie deserved better than being a pawn in Linda's games. We started setting boundaries. We told Linda we'd care for Sophie, but only if she contributed financially, emotionally, or both. When she balked, we cut contact. It hurt David, but it was necessary. We enrolled Sophie in school, found a therapist who specialized in trauma, and slowly, she started to heal. Her nightmares lessened. Her smiles grew. One day, as we watched Sophie chase bubbles in the park, David took my hand. "I'm sorry I let my mom push us into this," he said, "but I'm not sorry we're here." I squeezed his hand. "Me neither. But we're doing this on our terms, not hers." Sophie ran up, giggling, and hugged us both. For the first time, I felt like we were a family, not because we had to be, but because we chose to be. What would you do if you were forced to choose between family loyalty and personal limits? Is it fair to guilt someone into taking on a burden that isn't theirs? Share your thoughts. Where do you draw the line between duty and self-preservation?